Fine. Then let's see 2 and 3. ये दो यूनिट्स भी हैं, ये भी बहुत डोमिनेंट है पेपर 2 में. Mostly philosophical aspect and union government, right? If you right here also a lot of general questions were asked, right? Mostly the values in the preamble. And so one or the other question, 15 markers, 10 markers, sometimes 20 markers also, values in the preamble. Mostly related to justice, secularism, and democratic socialism, or sovereignty. Fine. So a lot of questions can be asked on these ideas, and they are asked consistently. Fine. Then, if we leave preamble, then obviously questions, nature of questions mostly are in the form of fundamental rights or fundamental rights versus DPSP, right? Or any new duty, fundamental duty, if something has been added to the fundamental duty, right? Now see, in fundamental rights, what unique questions aate hain, right? Concept of FR, obviously, which is not general studies type, but it is a topic which is universal. It doesn't matter it is asked in paper 2 or GS paper 2 or PubAt paper 2. Concept of fundamental rights, right? So it is classified into origin, nature, implementation, issues, and जो भी recent judgments आए हैं, they are more or less influencing this question. Right? One favorite topic is obviously the idea of equality. Right? The idea of social justice. So what they do, or UPSC does, it mixes it. That do you think civil services in India, do you think public administration in India, do you think public administration in general is supposed to protect social justice, is supposed to promote equality, right? Is neutrality in civil services, right, an important ingredient, an important factor influencing the social justice or equality? Fine. Right? How it is being promoted. Give examples. Right? Now see, so how civil services or public administration can be made more socially sensitive, can promote equality, right? Can neutrality be used to influence these factors? ये कैसे होता है? उसके examples दो. Fine. Now, this is also one nature of question. So you can talk about RTE, privacy, Article 28, right to life, उसका expansion, और कैसे judicial review ने right, how judicial review has enforced administrative responsibility. Fine. Then एक nature of question ऐसे ही आएंगे. Why not? There's no right answer. There's no absolute answer. But there can be a right answer. But see, logic to same है ना. Ethics is not separate from administrative ethics, that you have to understand. It is not separate from governance. राइट, इशू वही है, वो एथिक्स भी गवर्नेंस की ही बात करता है, राइट. ये इंडियन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन भी इंडियन गवर्नेंस की बात करता है और गवर्नेंस भी गवर्नेंस की बात करता है. इट्स नॉट अबाउट डिस्टिंक्शन, राइट, इट्स अबाउट द लेंथ एंड ब्रेड्थ ऑफ द कंटेंट. We'll talk about on Monday, don't worry, Monday or tomorrow, whenever. Fine, I have to review your copies also. Okay, so let us say, first finish with the ideas. So let us see. So here, whenever such questions will come, they will either be focusing or linking these civil services, Indian administration, in general administration to this, right? Or they will do something interesting. They can use the paper 1 theoretical perspectives. Right? For example, Weberian concept of neutrality. Right? Or Weberian concept of apolitical orientation. Right? Or Weberian concept of anonymity. Right? Has given way, has been eliminated in the era of social media. Right? In the era of civil services activism. Right? In the era of digital era governance, whatever. Do you think somewhere it impacts the constitutional duty or impacts upon the constitutional duty of the civil servants? Right? Will such changes undermine the implementation of fundamental rights? Or which will such changes create the conflict between citizens and administration? Now, you have to keep in mind, all this will give you a heading which you can write and you will get marks, right? So, क्या citizen administration conflicts बढ़ रहे हैं? How it can be overcome? Fine. So see this. So they can use Weber, they can use Wilson. Fine. They can use many other scholars. They can talk about Forte. Is Forte's idea of integration applicable to citizen administration conflict, right? In the context of fundamental rights or the judicial review of fundamental rights, like Article 21, discuss how the administrative role or responsibility has been modified, and whether the administration would be able to, perform its duty ethically and morally in the context of increasing judicial review. Do you think the increasing judicial interpretation of fundamental right is an indication of reducing or declining administrative action, administrative initiative in protecting the human rights of people? अभी ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं, ये बहुत जनरल क्वेश्चंस हैं, and that is why paper 2 becomes tough, because it is general, and it is because most of you mug up the paper 2. So I can't do anything about it right now, obviously. Fine, but logic is that in the what you can say, in the urge of rationalizing the content, what you do, you try to keep everything in points, but this is not how the questions will be designed. You have to keep points, right? But you also have to keep the broader image. Only then you can fit a lot of content into that. Okay, chalo, we'll see how we can do it. Okay. So एक nature of question ऐसा आ सकता है. Fine. Then they can also be more micro, pinpointed questions. For example, fundamental rights gives the freedom of speech and expression. Right? Now see the question. Is freedom of speech expression available to citizens equivalent to the civil servants? Now stops. So fundamental right है, constitutional values है, right? But see how they have manipulated this area. So is equivalent to civil servants, right? Do civil servants also need the similar protection of fundamental rights as the citizens, right? What is the concept of public duty, right? Or public servant? Do you agree that by virtue of being a public servant or performing a public duty, the civil servants are liable to be restricted in terms of their fundamental rights. One aspect. Do you think their fundamental rights, or they should have equal access to, or maybe a greater access to fundamental rights than these citizens? In the, because the nature of the function they perform, right? Just say it is a clear indication of how the fundamental rights of the public servants are much more broader than the fundamental rights of the citizens. National Security Act, or whatever these Makoka, Gakoka, lot of laws are there. Right? So you can bring these perspectives also, right? They can also obviously talk about FR, like I said, versus DP. Yes. Right? What could be the impact of the latest judgment? What could be the impact of the latest reform of cooperatives? Right? Under Article 19 on the DPSP. अब right to form cooperatives, कौन सा right है भाई available? Article 19, you can form cooperatives. What does this mean? And government has created a multi state cooperative society act 2005. अभी तो अमेंड किया उसको. Multi-state cooperative society can be formed. सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बोला है कि भाई दी कोऑपरेटिव और स्टेट कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटीज में दिस लॉ विल नॉट बी एप्लीकेबल डायरेक्टली. व्हाई? बिकॉज इट इज द राइट ऑफ द स्टेट. Fine. So it violates somewhere the federal principle. But formation of cooperative is good. So interstate या multi-state cooperatives can be created. अब उसमें भी issue है. The multi-state cooperatives will be created, so they will function within the state and outside the state. Right? So when they will function within one state and another state also, or between the states, so while they are operating in a state, which law will be applicable? Central law. Fine, but the nature of the cooperative society is not like that. Kyun? The society is created by community. So if a state cooperative society is there, right, a multi-state is there, the members are not coming from outside. Members are coming from those states only. Fine. तो एक ही society state में community, दो community or people from the same community are subjected to different laws. Fine. ये भी एक issue है. Right? State will incur expenses. There are a lot of other legal formalities to be performed. So ये एक problem है. Fine, but let us assume this way. So they will create cooperatives. Right? Creation of cooperatives, how does it enhance the aims and objectives of the DPSP? Right? So Gandhian philosophy, right? Purpose of welfare, community participation in development, 39B, 39C, creation of wealth, distribution of wealth, ये सब use करना है, यहाँ पे use करना है. Fine. So again, equality, right against exploitation, chalo 15. Fine. And likewise, how that is related to, fine, the DPSP, or the purpose of the DPSP is like the free legal aid, justice for all, and whatever. Right? So they can keep asking such questions, right? अब UCC पे debate चली रहा है, fine, Article 44, you know. So how UCC promotes the concept of secularism, right? In fact, on the face of it, it seems to be opposite to the idea of secularism. क्यों? इसका भी logic है. India follows political secularism, not social secularism. स्टेट सेकुलर है, लोग नहीं. Fine. So bringing UCC is somewhere violating the secularism, first of all. Right? Secondly, right? Yes. When you look at again, then you feel कि हाँ, no, it promotes secularism. How it promotes? It develops some common aspects, right? But हमारा concept of secularism commonness नहीं है, homogeneity नहीं है, right? Our concept of secularism क्या है, right? Diversity. So that's a big problem. हम heterogeneity में believe करते हैं, right? We believe in federation of faiths. So हमारा बिलीफ ये है भी. So see, they will, or UPSC will design questions on this idea, right? The debate around UCC, how UCC enforces secularism, how UCC may violate secularism, right? Indian secularism is not based on this idea, right? Indian secularism is not a product of the Western mindset, right? And likewise. Or generally, you can say that India has technically not been a secular nation. Secularism is a concept that is borrowed from the Western philosophy, right? तो ऐसे क्वेश्चंस आ सकते कि भाई रोल क्या है एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का वहां पे, फाइन, हाउ एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन और सिविल सर्विसेज प्रमोट सेक्युलरिज्म, फाइन, हाउ सिविल सर्विसेज कैन प्रोटेक्ट सोशल जस्टिस, हाउ सिविल सर्विसेज कैन promote welfareism, फाइन. नाउ देन सिविल सर्विसेज एंड फेडरलिज्म, अब ये भी एक इशू है. Fine. Lot of questions every year. You'll see federalism पे question हमेशा होता है. Fine. And these questions are spread very broadly across the syllabus. One, obviously, the concept of federalism in India. What kind of concept we follow? Fine. Then federal features. ठीक है भाई. Federal features इसमें federal versus unitary आ सकता है. Fine. Then, what is more preferable? Federal is preferable or unitary is preferable? Why? Reasons for all of them. Fine. Then, फेडरलिज्म एक आइडियोलॉजिकल आइडिया है. Fine. सेमेंटिक्स है या और प्रैग्मेटिज्म है. Fine. और नीड है, or it is based on your realism. See, obviously for us, both the elements are right. Obviously, we inherited a very diverse nation, diverse territory. So, ये भी important है. Semantics क्या होता है? Fine. Federalism is a semantic idea. UPSC का question है ये. Fine. ये सिर्फ दिखावा है. Fine. Play on words है. Yeah, there is a real federalism. So something is superficial, something is merely a vocabulary, something is merely a kind of tokenism, or there is a real need, or there is a real federalism available, visible in Indian context. Fine. Britishers obviously भी federal चाहते थे, but उनका federal हमें model accept नहीं था. British system basically unitary था. Fine. When they were leaving, they wanted to make it federal. See how illogical that would be. Fine. So they can ask these kind of questions. Was it a practical reality? Yes, it was. Fine. Neighbors, internal security, external security, this. It is quite obvious that many of us would have preferred unitary system. But federalism gave us more protection. Why? It stabilizes the governance. Right? The more we have the opportunity for incorporation of diverse elements, right, the more stable a system of political system may become. So initially जो federalism था, obviously वो guided था towards control, or it was trying to overcome confrontation. It was more conservative क्यों कंजर्वेटिव था? क्योंकि सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट डिड नॉट ट्रस्ट दी regional units. There was no conflict at all in the beginning because there was single government, single party in majority of the states. Fine. Unless Kerala, West Bengal, Northeastern, certain states become, technically different from the central government. So, initially, it was okay. Fine. So there is a confrontation in the beginning. There is more of conservativeness. Then slowly we start transforming. Constitution बोलता है भाई cooperative federalism चाहिए हमें. Fine. Fiscal federalism चाहिए. Right. Constitution बोलता है कि okay fine we need to have competitive federalism. Though this is more of Niti Ayog's idea. But Constitution भी बोलता है once the 73rd, 74th Amendment comes into picture, we believe that we are into competitive federalism. Center, state, local, right? They will be performing multiple developmental functions. So it is quite obvious that it does not talk about these units to be dependent on each other, right? It says that they should have their own resources. They should be capable of leading their own functions. इसीलिए तो classify किया गया है 11th schedule, 12th schedule, 7th schedule क्यों बनाया गया? इसीलिए बनाया गया. Fine. So over the time, we started moving through this. Fine. या फिर हमने बोला कि ठीक है भाई हम cumulative federalism की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं. Fine. This government is more focused on competitive federalism, cumulative federalism, bargaining federalism. These are references, right? These are not various models. These are more about context. Fine. So, bargaining federalism is basically the era of the planning commission. Right? And emergence of non-Congress governments. Cumulative federalism क्या है? What is the idea of cumulative federalism? कौन हुई? कुछ तो बोलो. नहीं? Oh, ठीक है, but that is as an idea. How does it work? Now see, second ARC नहीं पढ़ी है तुमने, है ना? सेकेंड ARC बोलता है भाई दो मॉडल्स इंपॉर्टेंट हैं. प्रिंसिपल ऑफ subsidiarity, right? Principle of solidarity. क्या है subsidiarity? You know, the power must move to the lowest level, right? So a good federal system is one where we have most of the powers and functions delegated to the lower levels, lowest level. That means as per principle of subsidiarity, the major developmental function should be performed by the local governments or regional governments, and only periphery functions, boundary functions should be performed by the union government. Principle of solidarity क्या है? जैसे हमने बोला सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप बन गया भाई, एसएचजी फेडरेशंस बन गए, कोऑपरेटिव्स बन गए, कम्युनिटी बेस्ड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बन गए. क्या कर रहा है? फाइन. सो डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन ऑफ पावर मस्ट नॉट रिजल्ट इन डिसइंटीग्रेशन, फ्रैगमेंटेशन ऑफ द सोसाइटी. फाइन. तो सॉलिडारिटी प्रमोट करे मतलब कम्युनिटी बेस्ड मॉडल्स, राइट? रूरल अर्बन डिवाइड को काउंटर करे. It must overcome. Now see, what is cumulative federalism saying? Governance या good governance क्या किसी एक का फंक्शन है? नहीं, है ना? So कैसे ये होगा good governance? It will have contribution of all, local, state, union. फाइन. फॉर एग्जाम्पल प्लानिंग कहाँ है? डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड. राइट. कैपेसिटी, कैपेबिलिटी एंड स्किल, ये प्रोग्राम, वो प्रोग्राम, वो प्रोग्राम, वो प्रोग्राम. फाइन. रिसोर्स, see, triple impact in one single program. There is no overburdening of these levels of government while performing the developmental tasks. So रूरल डेवलपमेंट हो, अर्बन डेवलपमेंट हो, रिसोर्स एक मैनेज कर रहा है, स्किल्स और टेक्नोलॉजी एक दे रहा है, और प्लानिंग एक कर रहा है. कोई भी ओवरबर्डन नहीं है. राइट. फाइनेंस कमीशन के ग्रांट्स देख लो. फाइन. 15 फाइनेंस कमीशन या 16 फाइनेंस कमीशन, जो भी टर्म्स ऑफ रेफरेंस है, राइट, और पॉसिबल टर्म्स ऑफ रेफरेंस है, दैट यू सी. व्हाट इज इट टॉकिंग अबाउट? नीति आयोग. What is the roadmap talking about? Right? 3-year, 5-year, 15-year, whatever is they are talking about, agenda, action plan, whatever. Right? They are focusing primarily on using the local governments as the agents of change. So using them, empowering them, and not necessarily burdening them. तो क्यूमुलेटिव फेडरलिज्म क्या है? तुम्हारा एक थ्योरेटिकल मॉडल है, राइट? ऑब्वियसली इतना सोचा नहीं होगा तुमने, है ना? है ना, सोचने टाइम नहीं होगा इतना, है ना? बहुत बिजी हो तुम लोग मेंस लिखने में. तुमने एक पढ़ा भाई मॉडल ऑफ नियोलोकलिज्म. दैट इज क्यूमुलेटिव फेडरलिज्म. Neolocalism as an idea has promoted cumulative federalism. What is neolocalism saying? Apart from what you have studied, Tony Blair, neoliberal movement in UK, what is the idea of neolocalism? इसका बेसिक लॉजिक क्या है? पहले तो ये इंपॉर्टेंट है ना. टोनी ब्लेयर का कोई यूज नहीं हमारे लिए. विकीपीडिया 2004 ऑनवर्ड्स, ये उसका कॉन्टेक्स्ट है. दैट्स अ यूनिटरी सिस्टम. वी आर आल्सो पार्लियामेंट्री डेमोक्रेसी, राइट, बट वी आर नॉट यूनिटरी. यूके यूनिटरी मॉडल है, इजी है उसके लिए रिफॉर्म्स इंप्लीमेंट करना, हमारे लिए नहीं. व्हाट इज द आइडिया ऑफ नियोलोकलिज्म? दैट इज व्हाट वी आर डूइंग. नो, क्या कर रहे हैं हम? क्यूमुलेटिव फेडरलिज्म में ये काम कर रहे हैं. फाइन. बट नियोलोकलिज्म का आइडिया सिर्फ ये नहीं है. सी, राइट, फेस्लर इज अ स्कॉलर. फेस्लर, in fact, Golumbieski has also used this idea while talking about फेडरलिज्म इन यूएस. फेस्लर एक स्कॉलर है, वो बोलते हैं कि भाई व्हाई डू वी गो फॉर डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन? नाउ सी, दिस इज मोर इंटरेस्टिंग. लेट्स नॉट मग अप टोनी ब्लेयर. यूजलेस हो गया, वो खत्म भी हो गया, वो कंटेंट यूजलेस है हमारे लिए. डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन क्यों किया जाता है? व्हाई डू वी डू डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन? सी, we are talking about values in Indian constitution and we have moved to urban government, local government, decentralization. That is how the syllabus has to be read, right? That is how paper 2 has to be read. Only then we will have content, otherwise we will not have content. If you see the nature of questions in paper 2, they don't come unit wise. They might be visible कि हाँ इस यूनिट में ये लिखा है, ये लिखा है, right? But वो यूनिट वाइज क्लासिफाई नहीं होते हैं, वो आइडिया वाइज, थीम वाइज क्लासिफाई होते हैं. Right? 14 units are basically 7 to 8 units only if we study them properly. Decentralization क्यों चाहिए? What is the idea behind decentralization? Right? Let's talk about Gully Kerwick. Right? फ्योल बोलता है centralization, Gully Kerwick बोलते हैं decentralization, centralization. दोनों काम करेगा. Right? Most of these scholars in theoretical aspect also, some have favored classical, have favored centralization. Apart from the classical, they have favored decentralization. Why decentralization is favored as an idea, चाहे political हो या administrative हो? क्यों? फिर तो सारी आर्मी को खत्म कर देना चाहिए. We should dismantle the armies, no? They cannot work without centralization of power. Then why do we keep armies? That is not the logic. See, efficiency है, correct है, logic है. But what do we believe? We believe when the strategy to understand the organization and its functioning, right, is based on structure, then it is centralization. When the strategy to understand the same organization is based on humans, fine, then the strategy is decentralization. So अगर structure centric model है तो centralization, human centric model है तो decentralization. अब decentralization political क्यों favored है? Because the logic is that where is the major mass residing? मेजर पॉपुलेशन कहां पे है, मेजर मास कहां पे है, राइट? और डेवलपमेंट क्या है? ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक अप्रोच है. सो कैसे ये ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक होगा अगर ह्यूमंस उसमें इन्वॉल्व नहीं हो? So that is the idea, that once we have to go for mass mobilization, once we have to focus on development of the mass, using the mass itself, how are we going to do it? So then it was realized कि भाई local level development is the best strategy to make the development more human centered, right? More people centered, more identity centered. उनकी identity भी होनी चाहिए, उनका role भी होना चाहिए, fine? उनकी uniqueness भी preserve होनी चाहिए. See, that is how we evolve. So ये सारा logic change हो गया, right? जब United Nations ने या UNDP ने development program को reorient कर दिया. In fact, you will see that more focus on decentralization started when we shifted from MDG to SDG, right? When we shifted from GDP to Human Development Index, सारा focus change हो गया. So that is logical, right? So how are we going to mobilize the mass? So we need to decentralize. So Fessler बोलता है कि भाई एक major push towards decentralization has come from the ideology that decentralization is always better than centralization. बोलते इसका और कोई ऐसा कंट्रीब्यूशन नहीं, बट ये आइडियोलॉजिकल व्यू है कि इन एनी डे पार्टिसिपेशन इज प्रेफरेबल टू सेंट्रलाइजेशन, inclusion is preferable to exclusion, even though it's not necessary that governance will be better by inclusion and worse by exclusion. ऐसा तो नहीं होगा. फाइन, पहले भी डेवलपमेंट होता था, राइट? लोगों के लिए काम करते थे, गवर्नमेंट्स वर वर्किंग फॉर पीपल, गवर्नमेंट वाज फोकस्ड ऑन पुअर पीपल, वेलफेयर, जस्टिस पहले भी होता था. फाइन, वी कैन नॉट से कि 1950 टू 1990 या 2000 तक जस्टिस नहीं हुआ इंडिया में. क्यों? ह्यूमन सेंटर्ड अप्रोच नहीं था. दैट्स इलॉजिकल. फाइन, तो एंड्स कैन बी अचीव्ड, राइट? मीन्स अलग अलग हो सकते हैं, एंड्स कैन बी अचीव्ड. सो एक फोकस आइडियोलॉजिकल है. Second, he says, is pragmatism. अब pragmatism क्या है भाई? ये fact है कि reality. When you look at the reality, is it difficult? Is it not difficult to sit at the top and think about the bottom? Is it not difficult to sit somewhere else, right, at headquarter and try development at the local level? Is it not difficult in terms of logistics, resource, human resource, skill, understanding the actual problems at the local level? तो बहुत difficult काम है, fine? तो practically ये नहीं किया जा सकता, right? जब तक हम we don't go at the lower level. So pragmatism, practicality, fine? Rationality. इसने बोला कि नहीं, centralize होने से चीजें नहीं हो पाएंगी, fine? It will create a lot of problems. Third, when you decentralize, can you have better control over resources, people, manpower, development programs? क्या better control कर पाओगे? Administrative reason. Right? किसी चीज को समझना, right? Plan करना बहुत difficult है, और फिर उसको execute करना तो और भी difficult है. So Fessler says ideological, pragmatism, administrative. Right? And then he says another important aspect of decentralization is This is the latest governance strategy. The governments have to be more acceptable. They have to implement things that they want, and they are most likely to fail because they have not involved people who are supposed to be benefited by it or who are supposed to be impacted by it into the process of governing. This is the latest need of inclusion. Fine. अब ये समझो, if we keep this analysis, fine, there are so many other scholars also जिन्होंने लिखा है, but it's okay, let's keep him. Fessler is quite influential. So he says कि let's keep this as logic and let us imagine कि government decentralize कर रही है. Fine. But वो बोलते हैं कि decentralization as a strategy, right? जब first wave होता है, fine, ये जो पहला स्टेज है डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन का, बिलीव क्या है? दैट डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन इज द बेस्ट स्ट्रेटजी. फाइन. व्हाट इज द बिलीफ? द बिलीफ इज डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन इज द एंड. नहीं, यही तो लगता है ना भाई कि बच्चे को अलग घर दे दो, उसको ऑटोनॉमी दे दो, है उसको ओल्ड राजेंद्र नगर में रख दो अकेले, तो वो बेचारा आईएएस बन ही जाएगा. फाइन. नोबडी सीज थिंग्स अबाउट कि घर में मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल फील घर में बच्चा नहीं पढ़ सकता. क्यों भाई? ऐसा क्या कर रहे हो घर में कि बच्चा नहीं पढ़ सकता? अगर तुम्हारे घर में ऐसा नहीं है तो फिर आज तक जो हुआ है वो कैसे हुआ? That's illogical. Fine. The only thing is that what we are trying to say, कि okay, we need the child to focus, right, strategically only on that. Fine. That is what the purpose is. Same logic. तो हमने बोला भाई डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन करो, डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन करो, डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन करो. क्यों करो, क्या होगा? किसी ने नहीं पूछा, सबने बोला डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन करो. बेटा कंप्यूटर सीख लो, एआई सीख लो, बेटा कोडिंग सीख लो. क्या करना है कोडिंग का ये नहीं पता. दैट इज द आइडिया. दैट इज कॉल्ड डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन एज द एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव. फाइन. फिर सेकंड वेव आता है या सेकंड स्टेज आता है. इट इज रियलाइज्ड. फाइन. अब ये 1960s 50s 60s का फेज है. फाइन. मोस्ट ऑफ द डेमोक्रेटिक गवर्नमेंट्स वांट टू डिसेंट्रलाइज. क्यों करना है, क्या करना है, कुछ नहीं पता, करो डिसेंट्रलाइज. फाइन. सेकंड वेव आता है 1970s ऑनवर्ड्स. अब इंडिया में तो इमरजेंसी था, दैट्स अ डिफरेंट इशू. But 1970s onwards आता है, where you'll see that lot of bills were presented in the parliament. हाँ भाई decentralize करो, local government बनाओ, ये committee, वो committee, वो committee, वो committee. अब now see the logic. It becomes now interesting. कि decentralization is not just an end, it is a means to an end. अब ये दोनों बन जाता है. देखो कि decentralization means भी है और decentralization end भी है. Let's come to the third aspect now. This is where Tony Blair, all this comes. 1980s और 90s का फेज है ये. अब ये बोलता है इंटरेस्टिंग कि भाई सी मीन्स भी है, एंड भी है, राइट? बट अल्टीमेटली एंड क्या है? डिफाइन करो भाई, एंड क्या है? व्हाट इज एंड? अ पार्टिसिपेशन इज अ मीन्स और एन एंड. इंक्लूजन इज अ मीन्स और एन एंड. सिर्फ डिफाइन करना पड़ेगा. It's not that easy. You are just saying, right, based on some theoretical knowledge. But when you understand various reports, when you understand or read government reports and data, right, you will find कि भाई participation एक means है. Ultimate objective empowerment है. Fine? लेकिन participation होने की वजह से और because of the participation that is taking place and the nature of the participation that is happening, the empowerment is a distant dream. It is not happening because of the nature of participation. Right? Quality of participation matters. It's not just participation. Fine. तो means है, end है भाई, कौन सा end है ये बताओ. Now that's interesting. Fine. अभी आता है जो fourth generation है हमारा. In fact, कुछ लोग बोला sixth generation पे हम आ गए. But let's imagine कि ये fourth generation है. Fine. यहाँ पे हमने बोला कि yes means है. एंड डिफाइंड. एंड डिफाइंड क्या भाई? गुड गवर्नेंस, डेमोक्रेसी, इंक्लूजन है, विमेन एम्पावरमेंट, जेंडर इंक्लूजन, जेंडर डेवलपमेंट, बैकवर्ड क्लास, सब हमने डिफाइन कर दिए. फाइन. अब लॉजिक क्या है? सी, if we have used this as a means, right, are we going to support them, right, or are we going to isolate them? If we are isolating them, if we are making these local bodies autonomous, what will happen? If they are made autonomous, they will become vulnerable. Fine. If they are centralized, the entire purpose becomes defeated. Right? If we centralize, the purpose is defeated. If we make them completely autonomous, it is vulnerable. तो हमें क्या करना पड़ेगा भाई? हमें एक middle path चाहिए. Middle path चाहिए ना भाई? That we will go for a selective decentralization. Right? We'll go for a guardianship decentralization. You understand? इसको guardianship decentralization बोलते हैं, conservative decentralization बोलते हैं. Fine, that we are trying to control certain elements and other elements we are giving autonomy. ठीक है? तो जब 15th फाइनेंस कमीशन या 14th फाइनेंस कमीशन बोलता है परफॉर्मेंस ग्रांट, right, special grant for local bodies, right, special resources through centrally sponsored schemes, नहीं, डायरेक्ट फंडिंग और डेवोल्यूशन टू द लोकल बॉडीज, ये क्या है? दिस इज द डिपेंडेंस ऑन द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट. बट एट द सेम टाइम व्हेन नीति आयोग बोलता है कि भाई यू नीड टू अर्न योर ओन रेवेन्यू, क्रिएट योर टैक्स रिसोर्सेज, हाउस टैक्स लगाओ, प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स लगाओ, स्वामित्व इंप्लीमेंट करो, नहीं, ये क्या है? इंडिपेंडेंस. सो सी, व्हेन देयर इज अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ डिपेंडेंस, yeah, some elements of centralization and a bigger element of decentralization, that is called new localism. क्योंकि earlier या traditional localism जो first two models हैं, वो क्या है कि decentralize करना जरूरी है, autonomy देना जरूरी है, चाहे ये local body, और in effect the local body becomes बर्बाद after a point of it doesn't matter to us, because we were supposed to decentralize, we have decentralized. There was no concern with what is the impact of decentralization, what are the differences in the social structure, power relationship at the local levels. Second ARC says that it doesn't mean, fine, decentralization, right, doesn't lead to democratization. Decentralization सिर्फ एक means है democracy का, right, equivalent to democracy नहीं है. Why? Because it says कि here, when you decentralize, what happens? The local bodies are captured by elites. Fine. Caste dominance है, ये रहेगा. Gender discrimination है, ये भी रहेगा भाई. ठीक है. Resource controlled है किसी के हाथ में, वो भी रहेगा. Lack of human resource है, ये भी रहेगा. Lack of capability है, ये भी रहेगा. This is what is changing. They are being given political power. That's it. And that too also they are not independent tier of government. So see, traditional जो localism है, that will say 3F दे दो. Functions, finances and functionaries. दो neoliberal मॉडल है, वो बोलेगा नहीं, 3F plus 2F और चाहिए. क्या 2F है? Framework, functionality. Apart from this, ये भी चाहिए. Framework कौन देगा? आप दोगे. You make a framework. Central government, state governments, right? They'll develop a framework in which, or ecosystem in which the local bodies will grow. Functionality, yes. You cannot just say कि your functions are free for you to use, right? You are free to, implement your functions. Why? Because we need to borrow some of your functions also. We do not have that much functions. So हम income tax collect करें अपने एरिया में, फाइन, या कोई टैक्स कलेक्ट करे अपने एरिया में और उसके लिए हम एक पैसा लें और सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट को टैक्स दे दें, खत्म। नहीं, राशन कार्ड हम बनाए, उसकी यूजर फी ले लोगों से और स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को दे दें। पासपोर्ट हम बनाए, ड्राइविंग लाइसेंस हम बनाए और उसका एक फीस चार्ज करें। दिस इज मॉडल विच इज एप्लीकेबल इन स्विट्जरलैंड, इन नॉर्डिक कंट्रीज, इन मोस्ट ऑफ द यूरोपियन कंट्रीज। लोकल बॉडीज परफॉर्म फंक्शंस ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ द स्टेट and the union government and they charge a user fee for that, right? तो इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स, म्युनिसिपल बॉन्ड्स, बहुत सारे से फंक्शंस लोकल बॉडीज भी परफॉर्म कर देता है। लोकल बॉडीज पर इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स का कॉन्सेप्ट अभी इतना नहीं है ना, क्योंकि कुछ पार्टियों को खुद अकेले कमाना था सब कुछ, ये भी गलत है। तो डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करो भाई कमाई, ये भी लॉजिकल है। दैट दे कैन नॉट फंक्शन इंडिपेंडेंटली ऑफ, right, the higher levels of government. That is the idea. तो सॉलिडारिटी भी रखो, रूरल, अर्बन, लोकल, रीजनल, नेशनल की, राइट? और सब्सिडियरिटी भी रखो भाई, हमें दूर भी रखो, समझ गए? सो परफेक्ट है ना? इट इज द काइंड ऑफ रिलेशनशिप विच इज नीडेड बिटवीन दी पेरेंट्स एंड देयर बेटा बहू, है ना? पास भी है, दूर भी है, बस ऐसा ही चाहिए। वही नियो लोकलिज्म है। So don't make us so autonomous that we are vulnerable. Security, law and order, internal security, border issues, ये हम tackle नहीं कर सकते. Fine. Development, we can tackle that, right? But we cannot do development unless these things are sorted out. How can Jammu Kashmir local elections will have any meaning? Fine. If there is no stability in the state, क्या मतलब उसका? लद्दाख इसीलिए ऑटोनॉमस उसको स्टेटस चाहिए, फाइन, 6th शेड्यूल में स्टेटस चाहिए, इसीलिए चाहिए ऑटोनॉमी, राइट? बट लद्दाख हैज टू अंडरस्टैंड इट इज एडजेसेंट टू जम्मू एंड कश्मीर. If it is given complete autonomy, then it will have its own vulnerabilities, right? China is close, Pakistan is close, Jammu Kashmir is close, and likewise. तो ये फैक्ट है, वहां भी न्यू लोकल स्ट्रैटेजी है कि हम उतनी ऑटोनॉमी देंगे जितनी तुम्हें चाहिए, उससे ज्यादा नहीं, right? और जितनी नेसेसरी है, सॉरी, नॉट यू वांट, व्हाट इज डिजायरेबल, ओनली दैट मच, right? So see, new local strategies are used everywhere. Community policing, new local strategies. Bhagidari, new local strategies, right? What is Kadumbushri, new local strategies. SHG Federation. So if government is promoting these, autonomous bodies, autonomous institutions, community-based models, it does not mean that government's control over them is totally eliminated. That is the idea. So new localization is affecting various type of organizations, not just local bodies. Because when you develop a decentralization strategies, you have to look into various aspects कि ultimately होगा क्या? What will be the impact of this strategy, right? So if local governments are made autonomous, will they perform only developmental functions or they will also perform some strategic functions? Fine. Environmental sustainability, अब local initiatives तो लिए जा सकते हैं, fine, but will the local government have the capability to manage it? They will not have capability. Cyber wars, we can digitize the local government, can they be protected from the cyber war or these cyber attacks? नहीं कर सकते, क्यों? They need skill manpower. तो security कौन provide करेगा? State government, national government, fine. So just digitizing is not enough. Common window systems, कौन यूज कर रहा है, मिसयूज कौन कर रहा है, बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स हो सकते हैं, राइट? सो दैट आइडिया इज नियोलोकलिज्म, फाइन. सो सी, टुडे व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन एज अ स्ट्रेटजी, फाइन, और वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट फेडरलिज्म एज एन आइडिया, वी हैव टू थिंक ऑफ द फेडरलिज्म फ्रॉम दिस पर्सपेक्टिव. इसको बोलते हैं क्यूमुलेटिव फेडरलिज्म, right? So whole of government, ठीक है, but see, that is more of an approach. We are talking about an ideology. Cumulative federalism क्या भाई? Ideology है कि भाई this is how the federal systems must work and cooperate, fine? Because ultimately, if something happens in Odisha or Bengal, it sends the message to the entire world. It's not just West Bengal's problem today, right? It is problem of the entire nation. ये आइडिया कम्युनिटी फेडरलिज्म में इंप्लीमेंट होता है. भाई केरला से लोग आईसिस में जा रहे हैं, फाइन। तो इमेज सिर्फ केरला की खराब हो रही है, पूरे इंडिया की खराब हो रही है ना। वायलेंस होगा, कम्युनलिज्म होगा, cow vigilante kills a boy, right? Is it generally this news is only affecting India or that particular state, or it is affecting the entire world? It is affecting the entire world. Fine, PIOs हैं, remittances हैं, investments हैं, बहुत सारी चीजें हैं, they will get affected. That is why central state local coordination, central state local control, right, and central state and local relationship needs to be revisited. That is called neo-localism. फाइन, तो लोकल लेवल फंक्शंस होंगे डेवलपमेंटल, फाइन, उसमें सेंट्रल और स्टेट का कुछ कंट्रीब्यूशन भी होगा, नो डाउट, फाइन। सर्व शिक्षा अभियान बिकम्स समग्र शिक्षा अभियान. व्हाट इज द बेनिफिट? सर्व शिक्षा अभियान वाज लॉन्च्ड इन विच ईयर? मिड डे स्कीम, मिड डे मील कब लॉन्च हुआ? अभी पोषण हो गया, प्रधानमंत्री पोषण है, 1995 में लॉन्च हुआ, रीस्ट्रेटेजाइज किया गया कि भाई इट इज नॉट जस्ट, बिकॉज इट वाज आल्सो फोकस ऑन दैट सेम थिंग कि भाई नरिशमेंट चाहिए, न्यूट्रिशन चाहिए और रिटेंशन चाहिए स्कूल. नेशनल प्रोग्राम फॉर चाइल्ड रिटेंशन एंड न्यूट्रिशन समथिंग, दैट वाज द प्रोग्राम. फाइन, सो देन उसको मिड डे मील किया गया, फिर उसको पोषण किया गया. क्यों पोषण क्यों किया गया? मिड डे मील वाज गिविंग ओनली द इंप्रेशन ऑफ द मील and it was being treated as standalone program. But when it is brought into Samagra Shiksha program Abhiyan now, right? So Poshan and Samagra Shiksha, which includes various aspects. So Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, this Shiksha for primary जो education था, right? या RT के अंदर जो 6 to 14 years का जो education है, all that brought together in Samagra Shiksha, teachers training, right? ये सब एक साथ ले रहा है. क्यों लाए? So Samagra and Poshan, why they have integrated? Why they are using it as a cumulative strategy? Fine, because it is obvious that one program, when it is working in isolation from another, right, is not going to create the impact. Fine. बच्चों का न्यूट्रिशन इंपॉर्टेंट है, लेकिन न्यूट्रिशन क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है? पढ़ाई के लिए तो है, बट न्यूट्रिशन क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है? बिकॉज दे आर टू बी ट्रीटेड एज ह्यूमन रिसोर्स, राइट? दैट इज समग्र शिक्षा. सर्व इज एजुकेशन फॉर ऑल, समग्र इज कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव एजुकेशन. अब एजुकेशन सिर्फ एजुकेशन के लिए क्या? नहीं, अवेयरनेस, सिटीजनशिप, न्यूट्रिशन, हेल्थ, वर्कफोर्स. सेम लोकल गवर्नमेंट को फंक्शन करना, ऑटोनॉमस फंक्शनिंग ऑफ लोकल गवर्नमेंट इज द ओनली डिजायर, और वी नीड टू क्रिएट द काइंड ऑफ इम्पैक्ट वी वांट. So they, UPSC can design questions on ideas which seem to you very general, but once they are asked as a question, it becomes very difficult for you to write. That's an issue. Why? Because then you have to think that way. आपसे वैसे नहीं लिख सकते. That is why it poses a problem. You read n number of books, but you will still not be very clear कि लिखूं क्या. Because you have to write through the thought process, not through the huge information that you have. So how are you going to develop that mindset? How you are going to link various topics? ये बहुत important है. उसके लिए वैसा समझना बहुत important है. So see this topic, right? Values, philosophy. अब इसमें एक part आता है constitutionalism, right? Bureaucracy, democracy. Role of bureaucracy in democracy. Now go back to Weber. Weber himself was quite conscious कि democracy के लिए bureaucracy useful है या नहीं है, right? Why he was conscious? Because he believed somewhere that bureaucracy has the tendency to centralize power, whereas democracy wants to decentralize power. Right? So it's like saying that a person with a terrorist mindset, how can he be used for welfare and justice? That is what bureaucracy is. उसका पूरा जो टेम्परामेंट है वो कैसा है? Centralized, status quoist, right? Controlling, regulating, discipline, punishment, ये उसका पूरा नेचर है. फाइन, पार्टिसिपेशन है ही नहीं, सबऑर्डिनेशन, एक्सेसिव कंट्रोल of superior over subordinate. How is that system going to serve the needs of the democratic society? But the problem is, it is going to serve. Why? Democratic society has lot of its own drawbacks, right? उन ड्रॉबैक्स को ओवरकम करने के लिए ब्यूरोक्रेसी चाहिए. See? So bureaucracy doesn't work on populism. Democracy works on populism, right? But populism has its own drawbacks, pitfalls. उसको काउंटर करेगा ब्यूरोक्रेसी. Also, when we take dichotomy perspective, तो ब्यूरोक्रेसी का काम अलग है, पॉलिटिक्स का काम अलग है. And that is how it can be shielded from the drawbacks of bureaucracy. कि भाई तुम उतना ही करो जो तुम्हारा काम है. We don't need more than that, right? You are an instrument to promote democratic goals or the goals decided by the political system. So this idea is also asked in various forms. Right? Is democracy compatible with bureaucracy? In spite of the difference between bureaucracy and democracy, right? Bureaucracy is one of the best means to promote the goals of democracy. Right? Most of the developing democracies have used a bureaucracy-led development model. अब ये क्वेश्चन पेपर 2 में है, right? But it may be taken as and coming from CPA, DA, but this is not how the subject needs to be studied. This is illogical. ये 2014-15 वाला पैरामीटर है, अब नहीं पढ़ते हैं सब. So illogical कि भाई there is a connection, there is a nuanced network between various topics. Right? So let us say they or UPSC can redesign the idea and ask that way. Right? Provide a comprehensive understanding of the changing role of bureaucracy or changing role of administration in the context of contemporary democracy in India. How do you view the role of bureaucracy under coalition politics? How do you view the role of bureaucracy under one-party dominance? Right? How do you interpret is the changing nature of democratic politics in India? ऐसे क्वेश्चन भी आ सकते हैं. Right? In the aftermath of recent elections, how do you think or what is going to be the impact of the elections or electoral politics on bureaucratic culture in India? If you've read T.N. Chaturvedi's book, you can write certain things, right? Even if you've read Riggs, and you've read Weber, you've read Farrell Heddy, you can write certain things. There's no problem with that. Fine. Almond and Verba, if you've studied that, you can definitely write what they're saying. Fine. Or in general, also if you've studied certain newspapers or books, fine. अब आपने जो contemporary scholars है, अगर उनकी analysis पढ़ी हो, तो बहुत सारे ऐसे स्कॉलर्स हैं जो कंटेम्प्रेरी एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव कल्चर को स्टडी कर रहे हैं. डन, फुजोनी, हु इज दैट पर्सन, दिस जेरी स्टोकर, फाइन, फर्जमैन, राइट, कोहली. देयर आर सो मेनी स्कॉलर्स, दे आर स्टिल स्टडिंग और दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट. देयर इज अ प्रोफेसर फ्रॉम लंडन स्कूल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स, शी इज टू कंसर्न्ड अबाउट, आई डोंट रिमेंबर हिज नेम, आई विल टेल यू. Right? She is quite concerned about the changing nature of politics administration relationships and its impact on the South Asian economy. How this nature of relationship is modifying, right? Rightist governments आएं तो economy कैसे shift हो गई, right? Liberal governments आएंगे तो economy पे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा, right? Adjoining neighbors पे क्या impact होगा? See there, Bangladesh is one such example. Fine. So see, in spite of having a good economic growth rate comparable to India, having a better human development index than India, having more expenditure on education than India, right? See, Bangladesh has plunged into a civil war. Riggs analysis, if you have studied, right? Politics administration relationship. So how a bureaucratic politics or politicization of bureaucracy will have consequences for economic growth. See? तो ये आपको लेटेस्ट एग्जांपल है, बांग्लादेश है, सीरिया है, इजराइल है, पैलेस्टीन है. सी Israel cannot be accepted as a country which has less economic growth, perpetually in war. Right? Many of the Middle East countries, right? Yes, they are affected by war. They are poor also to an extent, but many of these countries are also super rich, right? In spite of not having democracy. So, क्या डेमोक्रेसी एक्सेस ग्रोथ को लीड कर सकता है या ब्यूरोक्रेसी पावरफुल ग्रोथ को लीड कर सकता है? ये भी एक डिबेट है. So there are many countries which have strong bureaucracies but no democracies. Right? China. But still they are economically very successful. Fine. Have you understood this much? So today let's keep it this way, right? Sunday or Monday, see whenever. Because I'm still collecting some data for you. I have collected a lot of data, right? But I want to put into a perspective, so it will take little time. So let's keep it 2-3 days, right? If we are able to do 2.5 hours, 3 hours, वो ज़्यादा better है rather than taking one, 5-7 hours का slot जो होगा, it will be more difficult for you to spare, right? But yes, you have read it once, you have revised it. If you just put now this framework together, right, then you will have a lot of benefit, I'm telling you. Fine. So you can easily, not easily, but yes, with little resistance and effort, you can get 140, 150 in paper 2 as well. Fine. And that is the strategy, because paper 1, nobody can beat you if you have studied properly. Fine. Paper 2 also, they will not be able to if you are able to use it properly. So if you are able to score somewhere 140s in 2, both, that's better. For scoring 140s in paper 1, you need to be conceptually very strong. For scoring 140s in paper 2, you need to have a very broad spectrum of understanding. That's the difference. Fine. So we'll talk about how we'll write the answer, or how you will rearrange the answer you are writing. Fine. So next class में मिलते हैं. जैसा भी होगा, we'll inform you. Don't worry. You hardly have now 15 days, I think. But that's okay. Right? Time will always be less. If you have 365 days, then also someday you will have only 5 days. Fine. So don't think that way. हमेशा ही रहेगा. You have studied enough. You have done all the work more or less. Fine. So relax. Fine. Examiner is not personally, after you, right? Or he wants to criticize you independently of anyone else. This is not so. Every examiner would be willing that, okay, person should be good enough so that we can give him the marks we want, right? So no examiner wants to give you less marks. Right? You feel that way, think that way, only then you can score marks. The moment you start taking examiner as your adversary or opponent, right? Same happens. If a student starts feeling कि teacher से ज़्यादा ज्ञान मुझे दिखाना है, right? Teacher के सामने मुझे अपनी knowledge दिखानी है. Fine. That very moment, teacher obviously he's also seen a lot of things, right? He has been more experienced. That very moment, teacher takes this something as, if you take something on ego, he also takes on ego. That's very normal. तो अगर तुम एग्जामिनर को सिर्फ ये दिखाना चाहते हो कि तुम्हें बहुत आता है, right? फालतू की चीज तुम्हें आती है, don't do that. Examiner is coming with a mindset. Hey, bhai, what is the relevant answer? What is the best answer? What is the truth? I am not in search for that, right? Nobody is in search for that. So if you know that Finance Commission has recommended this, how I am going to present this into the answer, that is important. Santhanam committee has talked about it. Second ARC has talked about it. Recently, this committee has talked about it, right? Or Hota committee has talked about this, or some committee, whatever. Right? Or that training committee, kaun si bani thi abhi, it is that women, that Kiran. So the logic was that, see, it didn't have anything that was somewhere asked in the exam, right, last year, but did not have anything substantial. No, जो national training policy है 2012 या 2015 onwards, इसको 16 onwards, what is it called in Hindi? Mission Karmyogi. Fine, वही लिखना था आपको. If you had the new performance review, new public governance, new performance budgeting, क्या है? कुछ भी नहीं. If you logically understand the content, you can write it. Right? The moment you want to make it too technical, assuming because examiner has asked a very typical word, he wants a very typical content, he doesn't want it. Fine? You cannot answer a code with a code. You have to decode it and then write it. So definitely always simplify. Fine? That is the key. Fine. See you then next class. Take care. Okay, till then, all the best.